Okay, we will call this meeting to order. Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, March the 5th at 6 o'clock. Can I have an approval of the agenda, please?
So moved.
Okay. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. There's no minutes to adopt, so we'll move into public participation. No. Where's Chris? What the heck?
Yeah. He couldn't make it today.
Yeah. All right, thanks, Al. No old business. Under new business, a discussion, budget process overview. Christopher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening to Council and our public. I'm just going to run us quickly through the budget overview presentation, only 3 slides, just summarizes the steps that we've taken today to go through the budget. Then, if it pleases the committee, I'll move right into final discussions for a couple of the projects that we haven't had an opportunity to discuss. Just recognizing that we want to provide opportunity for scrutiny and questions for everything that forms part of our budget. Shortly after that, I'll be presenting the financial report, which is looking for a recommendation from the Committee of the Whole to approve the budget as presented. So as you recall, we've been through a couple meetings, February 5th, February 19th, and went through our operating budget in detail. And then last week was our longer meeting, but we covered a lot of ground, went into the engineering operating budget as well as an overview of our asset management and the details of our capital budget. Today, we're going to be asking for notional approval of the budget, and which will result in the financial plan bylaw being prepared, the tax rate bylaw being prepared, and the sewer rate bylaws being prepared and adopted with the current plan for April. Since the last version, so what you have before you on the website and also on the agenda is version 4. So since version 3, 3 items have been changed. First of all, rock face monitoring was a special project in the most recent version. It's been rolled into operating for good reason. Staff recognize that this is a service. It's essentially a new service, and we're asking for funding for all 5 years of the financial plan. So if it's ongoing and it's operating in nature, it really should be funded by taxes and should form part of the operating budget. So overall, that budget was $10,000 per year. We're still working to determine what the appropriate amount is on an ongoing basis. Our Director of Engineering is working and providing risk analysis on the various rock faces throughout the municipality. And so next year we'll have a much more clear idea of what the annual operating should be. So we've moved that into operating, and that has impacted the recommended tax increase, which I'll talk about in just a minute. Secondly, we put into the capital budget the RCMP Detachment building repair budget, which we will discuss in 5.2 of today's agenda. And then the council chamber furniture budget was increased per the committee's request at the last meeting. So the tax increase recommendation has been revised to 1.38% from 1.3%, and that's 100% due to the inclusion of the rock face monitoring in the operating budget. Okay. So if it pleases the chair, unless there's any questions about that, I'll go into section 5.2.
I'm not seeing any questions from the public or committee. Councillor Paine?
Thank you. I'm just curious, there were no attachments with regard to the discussion for the remaining projects for the space planning or the RCMP detachment building repairs. And I'm just wondering if I missed that, or how is the public to know what we're considering when it's not included?
Thank you. Through the chair, the space planning special project actually was included in the financial plan, which was on the last meeting's agenda, and it is included in the financial plan. So there is a section of detail there, and I can point the public to where that is in the financial plan when we go to review that project, as well as RCMP detachment, which is new to this version. There is a section in the capital budget that describes the project, and again, I can direct the public and council to that at the time. Thank you.
Thank you. We can go right into 5.2 then.
Thank you. So saying that, I should just take a moment to find it in the financial plan.
What page is it? 60? It would be the space planning first and then the RCMP.
Okay, so thank you very much. So if you're looking in the financial plan, it's page 21 of the financial plan, page 37 of the agenda. So it's under the corporate administration operating budget, the special project section.
Sorry, could you say the page number again?
Yes, page 37 of the agenda, or page 21 of the financial plan bylaw, or financial plan document. So this project is a recommended project for 2019 in the amount of $50,000. It was added after much discussion among staff. You'll recall at last week's meeting, we did an overview of the asset management plans for the city, and one of the areas lacking in our asset management plan was facilities planning. So this project would complement our asset management planning. It would help define the space needs for our growing staff at a new facility. It also would support helping us determine what the correct amount of dollars would be for saving for a new facility that is more seismically appropriate and available for our future staffing needs. Do we maybe want to pause there and see if there's any questions about the space planning, and then after that, I'd like to discuss the detachment.
Any questions? Cynthia?
Thanks. Just the description is quite brief as to what the City Hall space planning is to entail. And I just wonder, is there further detail that I have not seen?
Through the chair. No, that's the sum total of the detail that's been provided.
Okay, so I'm just, I find it somewhat lacking that $50,000 worth of expenditure doesn't have more detail than that, because it could be interpreted many different ways with that type of description. So I think our budgeting should have a higher level of detail associated with it when there's a significant number attached.
Can you, Cynthia, perhaps you could provide staff with some examples in terms of, because I see this more of a planning kind of higher level versus in the weeds type of...
Well, it was discussed that there was X number of workstations, the chairs were mentioned as part of it. They're not even written down in this description, that the chairs for the public in the council chamber are part of that. So I don't know. I am just not comfortable with a description for a $50,000 spend that is left so discretionary with no description.
Ian?
Mr. Chair, this was in the budget in the past, and I believe it was under a description that was City Hall assessment or something like that. And we were considering striking it out, but given that there's an expectation for us to find a new City Hall for because of this condition of this building, we have to do some pretty fundamental work up front. So in our early costing of a new City Hall, we've taken, I'm going to say, indicators of what you would need for space. But to get into the specifics, we need to actually hire a space planner to come in and analyze organize the work that each staff member does and the type of space that's required of them, and then add on expectations around committee rooms, council chambers, things of that nature. So it's a preliminary exercise, pre-design, to determine what our current needs are today and what our needs and expectations will be for the next 20 years. That's really what it's about. And we have no idea whether it's going to be 50,000 or 20,000 or 70,000. It's really a place marker for 2019 until we actually contact space planning consultants and say, how much is it going to cost to do this work? So it is brief, and it's brief because we haven't got into that level of detail yet.
Cynthia?
So I'll just say that I do not support $50,000 for a study to look at what's required in City Hall. I think there's a lot of assumptions in terms of the usefulness of this building, and not many facts in terms of what it would cost to make this building useful or to get another building. And I was looking for some concrete improvements to what we have here to make the City Hall workable in the next 3 to 5 years.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, I can move forward there, Christopher, with the RCMP.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the latest version of the financial plan, you'll find in the capital budget, I'm just going to pull it up here for you. Pardon me, I should have had that ready, but here we are in the, thank you very much. So on page 80 of the agenda, or page 64 of the financial plan, we have the building infrastructure capital budget. So in the previous version, this wasn't included. Now you'll see a line item for the RCMP detachment repairs in the amount of $92,000. This project was included and approved in the 2017 financial plan. However, it was originally excluded from this plan pending more information from Langford. Langford provided us with the necessary information just recently and in time for this financial plan. Just a note on some of the nature of some of the expenditures. It would include HVAC repairs, roof repairs, additional furnishing for the growing staff over there. You may recall that we have in this financial plan a recommendation of a FTE increase to the watch clerk position, as well as the electrical work required there. The project would be fully funded by the RCMP detachment building reserve, which we do set aside money for on an annual basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the director? No? Cynthia?
Thank you. There was considerable debate in the previous year with regard to the whether or not the planned repairs are appropriately cost to be borne by Colwood, and I'd like to know what level of comfort staff have with what Langford has provided us, simply because I haven't been provided that information, so I couldn't tell you how it stacks up with last year.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, we've had multiple meetings on this issue because we did tie it up a little bit with the conflict around the lease as well, and we're moving forward, albeit slowly, on the lease conflict. And in the meantime, the detachment is definitely starting to run into problems around adequate workspace for the members and the municipal employees. So at the CAO level, the 3 CAOs involved, we've been working with both Langford and the building contractor that does all this work for the RCMP building, and not going to say we're comfortable with the office renos yet. We're still talking with them about being more efficient in using that space on the third floor. But the HVAC system, the roof repairs, the exhaust fans, and the additional furnishings and electrical work have reached a point of almost crisis. So we've all agreed that it's important to get on with the HVAC and the electrical work and the ventilation and the roof repairs. And we're still working with the RCMP on the level and type of office partitioning and I'm going to say the density of the people that are going to be occupying that third floor, because we're still not quite convinced that it's well laid out yet. I think the last conversation we had, we were considering bringing graphic office in to do some layouts for us to try and give us a little more certainty on what's necessary and how it'll be laid out in a manner that will be best used over the long term as opposed to a short term. So on this round of approvals, we are confident that they're necessary costs and that we need to get on with doing them. We've been sitting on these now since 2016.
Cynthia?
Just to follow up on that, the list that was provided in 2016 by the consultant seemed less than completely professional at the time, and that caused me a great deal of concern. So given that they're continuing to work with the same consultant, do we have any faith in the quality of workmanship that's going to be done?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, the consultant is actually the building manager. It's the contractor that is in charge of, has the contract to manage the facility on our behalf. We don't, short of terminating that contract, that's the company that we've all selected to manage that building for us. So in the meeting we had with them, I'd say early last summer, we were fairly confident that the numbers they had presented to us were reasonably accurate. The only thing that, as I said earlier, that we continue to have concerns about is how the third floor was partitioned out. Most of their numbers, particularly around the HVAC and electrical, are all coming from third-party contractors.
Okay, that gives me some comfort, and I'm just curious, given that the contractor who's managing the building on behalf of West Shore RCMP, how has that contractor been selected? I don't recall that process. So to me, that sounds very similar to the society that runs West Shore Parks and Rec, for example. I think we need to ask for some greater accountability.
Jason?
Just a question on the amount there, $92,000. Is that just Colwood's share, or is that the whole repair cost? And if it is just Colwood's share, what is Langford's share? And
Through the chair, yes, that's just Colwood's share. I believe the overall project budget is $250,000 approximately. I can't tell you exactly what Langford's share is with a couple moments, but I can say the cost sharing formula is exactly the same as we share other expenses.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, we will move on to 5.3.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So before you have a report...
one moment, please. Before we move on to 5.3, I'm looking at the council chambers furniture on page 65 of the report. And it says replacing the council furniture and the committee room furniture with 30 new seats. It doesn't mention anything about replacing those terrible seats at all. So I think that was the intent, was to get the public seating improved and not necessarily all of the committee and council chambers.
Chris?
Yeah, yes, through the chair, Councillor Nault. That's correct. So the scope of the project was increased to replace the audience chairs as well. The description wasn't updated, but the project dollar value has been updated to reflect that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to have many more happy bums there soon. Okay, now we'll move right into 5.3.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before you have a report detailing the consolidated budget, this budget recommends $25 million in expenditures, which includes capital expenditures and transfers to reserves and operating expenditures, balanced with $25 million in revenues, which includes operating revenues and transfers from reserves. Overall approval of this budget would result in a 1.38% tax lift approximately, which is approximately $24 to a representative residential home. In addition to that, for the sewer users, it recommends a 5% increase to the sewer user fee, which is reduced from the original proposal of a 14% increase. And that's approximately $9.25 to the average residential sewer user. Through the budget process, we've covered everything that you'll find in this consolidated budget, except a few revenues that aren't apportioned to a specific department. That would include casino revenues, for instance, arrears interest, and a couple other minor things. One issue, one part of the budget that remains unclear at this time is new construction revenue. We have a good indication of what new construction revenue is going to end up being. As early as last Friday, I checked on the new construction revenue figures, and they still support the amounts in the budget. But should the new construction amounts change between now and the revised roll, we would have to adjust the financial plan accordingly. And the report offers a couple of options to the committee of the whole with regards to that. We could increase or decrease taxes according to the change, or we could adjust the transfer to reserve as a result of that as well, with the transfer to resolve being the recommended approach to that. There are, as I mentioned at the beginning of this meeting and throughout the budget process, approval today would represent notional approval to staff and staff to get to work on some of the projects that are in here and haven't previously been approved. So, for instance, this year, a new project that appeared in the 2018 financial plan that wasn't in previous financial plans is the IT migration project. Also, the stormwater master plan is something staff would like to get to work on. The land use bylaw and Olympic View area plan we'd like to get to work on Tuesday. So approving this plan would provide notional and a strong signal to staff that we can get to work on some of those items that weren't previously approved. We wanted to take a moment before concluding this process to just summarize some of the lessons learned and some of the comments that we received from council through the process that we'd like to improve on for next year. I'll go over a couple of those things, and then I'll ask the committee for consideration of approval of the budget. First of all, we've heard a couple times some comments around the timing of the budget. Can we provide earlier indications of where the budget is heading? Internally and working with departments, we can improve on providing budget information earlier. For instance, we're already planning on starting our 2019 budget planning as early as April this year compared to September of last year. So we believe when we come to council at an earlier date, we're going to have a stronger picture and also a more complete 5-year picture for council and for the interested public. Another comment we heard is we would like to see what the tax impact of the specific operating budget increases are. So we reviewed the budgets on a per service level basis, and we displayed what the overall increase to that budget would be. But how does that translate to tax dollars, budget by budget? So if we're asking for a 15% tax increase in a specific, let's say, fire services, what does that translate to the average single-family dwelling for that specific department? And for the record, we're not asking for that increase for fire services. Also, very important note from last week's capital budget is we need to be able to provide council and the public with the operating impact of new capital projects. So when council is considering a new capital project, it's just not the overall investment that we make up front, but what are we committing ourselves to on an annual basis in terms of an operating increase? And we wanted to get that detail in this financial plan available for council and for the public. We weren't able to, but that's something we absolutely want to commit to next year. And lastly, the issue of recoveries being embedded in the expenses. So for instance, there's many public services that are provided, public works services that are provided that we're reimbursed for, say through Fortis or through a third party. And so the net cost was displayed this year, but it would be more helpful for council, this is what we heard, to provide the gross cost so that council can make a more informed decision regarding that project. So that will conclude my presentation, and there's a couple recommendations within the staff report. One is for the approval of the financial plan as drafted, and the other one is a recommendation surrounding the use of the non-market change or the new construction review should that change between now and when the financial plan bylaws are prepared. Thank you very much.
Cynthia.
Thank you. Just a question on your report. In your summary, there's the revenues with the transfers from reserves and the operating expenditures the total expenditures also include transfers to reserves. When you put those numbers one against the other, that adds up to a net decrease in reserves of $869,900. Can you just explain that to me?
Yes, thank you through the chair. So the nature of capital expenditures are that they're going to vary greatly from year to year. And this is why we use reserves to fund those capital expenditures. So in some years, you're going to transfer very little from reserve because you have very little capital expenditures. In other years, you're going to transfer more. This year, for example, we're anticipating paying for a $900,000 fire truck. So we're transferring that out of the reserve to fund it. There's also some special projects that are being funded from reserve this year. Affordable housing contribution, for instance, which is close to it's $528,000. So now, just to comment though, if you see that trend year after year after year, you're in trouble, right? So it's incumbent on the finance department to plan for how are we going to contribute on a sustainable way in the long term, and when we're going to draw from it. And that speaks directly to our need to develop sustainable infrastructure replacement funding levels. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I'm looking for a motion to council. Okay. Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. That's all you need? Perfect. Oh, okay. And our final public participation, if you had any questions, sir. Huh? Yeah, excellent. And I do want to offer a lot of kudos to staff for the hell of a lot of work that they put into this whole process. It's made it so smooth, easy to understand, and your explanations and presentations were spectacular. And just knowing that you picked up on some of the vibes and some of the comments that committee had in order to improve the process coming up, I think speaks volumes. So I'm just so very impressed. Thank you. With that, our next meeting is scheduled, well, usually there's a date here at the call of the chair. So Can I have a motion to adjourn? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried.